Thyros' eyes narrowed as the transport shuddered violently under a relentless barrage of plasma bolts. Metal groaned and sparks flew while alarms screamed through the narrow corridors. "I've always watched them sit in the back," he murmured, voice low and edged with disquiet as he gripped the hilt of his energy blade. His battle-scarred armor clanked with every forceful impact. Across from him, Vauron, the imposing warrior with intricate sigils etched into his armor, barked a terse order. "Secure the forward section. Karassa, form up with your unit." In the midst of chaos, Karassa, the stalwart Gari commander renowned for absorbing plasma fire like a living shield, responded immediately, rallying her troops with a resolute nod. "Understood, Vauron. We hold the line at all costs," she declared, her voice steady despite the fury of the attack. Meanwhile, Zyrex, the lithe and acrobatic Zolo whose movements defied expectation, darted between cover and cover, positioning himself to exploit every gap in the enemy ranks. Deep within the transport's belly, Nolan, the human leader, stood among his trembling soldiers. His face, usually set in determined calm, was etched with uncertainty. "Positions, hold steady," he commanded, though his tone wavered as he scanned his men. Lieutenant Daniels, his closest subordinate, exchanged a worried glance with Captain Reed. "Sir, why are we always at the back? We were told our strategy was to observe and then strike," Daniels whispered urgently, his voice nearly lost amidst the clamor of battle. Nolan's eyes flickered with conflicted determination. "We fight smart," he insisted, striving to instill resolve. "We rely on strategy, calculate every move, anticipate the enemy. That's how we win." His words, however, rang hollow in the face of the raw, unyielding assault now tearing through their ranks. A searing burst tore through a reinforced bulkhead, scattering sparks and splinters. Screams mingled with the rattle of disintegrating metal. Thyros moved like a shadow among the chaos, exchanging a brief, grim glance with Sarlacc, a grizzled veteran whose voice carried decades of battlefield lore. "They sit back not out of genius, but out of fear," Sarlacc growled. "We adapt because our lives depend on split-second instincts. These humans, they hesitate." As the first wave of attackers, sleek, merciless figures, stormed through a breached door, Vauron unleashed a volley of plasma shots, his motions honed over centuries of conflict. Karassa's shield wall absorbed the impact of oncoming fire, her resonant voice ordering, "Maintain formation, let none pass." Meanwhile, Zyrex leaped into the fray, his agile form slicing through enemy ranks with acrobatic strikes. And the humans? They scattered like startled prey. Sergeant Miles, a young soldier whose eyes brimmed with terror, fumbled with his sidearm. I can't seem to find my footing," he stammered, his words lost amid the roar of battle. One human fighter managed to raise his weapon, but before he could discharge a single shot, an enemy blade found its mark, silencing him forever. "Nolan! Front line!" Captain Reed shouted, urgency piercing the chaos. Nolan's face tightened in grim resignation as he watched his soldiers dissolve into disarray. "We fight smart. We don't fight for honor. We fight to win," he roared, desperation lacing his orders as he tried to rally his faltering men. Yet even as he barked these commands, the bitter truth weighed upon him. Their strategy, this theoretical brilliance of sitting back and calculating, was fatally flawed when the moment for decisive action came. Thyros advanced alongside Vauron, cutting down attackers with a fluid grace born of centuries of warfare. "You see, Karassa," Thyros said between fierce strikes, "our enemies adapt because they live for this moment. They seize the initiative and we respond instinctively. Your people, these humans, they overthink. They hesitate when every millisecond is a chance to live." In a guttural tone steeped in ancient battle wisdom, Vauron replied, "They believe that by sitting in the rear, they could calculate our moves and study our tactics. But in the chaos of war, hesitation is a luxury they cannot afford. They rely too much on planning and not enough on raw survival instinct." Inside the battered human command center, Nolan knelt beside a fallen comrade, his eyes brimming with regret as he cradled the man's lifeless hand. "Our approach failed because it was too theoretical," he confided quietly to Lieutenant Daniels, his voice cracking with remorse. "We thought that by sitting back, by observing from a safe distance, we could find the perfect moment to strike. Instead, we froze. We hesitated while our enemies, soldiers like Thyros, Vauron, and Zyrex, acted without a second thought. Daniels looked up, his gaze fierce despite his shaken composure. So tell me, sir, why did our strategy, which we always believed was our strength, crumble so utterly? What did we miss? Nolan swallowed hard before answering. Because our tactics were built on assumptions. We assumed that our minds could outmaneuver the raw force of battle. We thought our careful positioning would give us an edge. Instead, the enemy's instinctive, relentless drive exposed our inadequacies. We were outmatched not because we lacked intelligence, but because we lacked the willingness to fight on the front lines with unbridled ferocity. In another corridor, Aldrin, a Skardver officer, and Marzik, Karassa's trusted second-in-command among the Gari, huddled over a flickering holomap. Aldrin's voice was low and reflective. We've fought over 100 wars, each teaching us that survival depends on action, not idle observation. Look at these human tactics, they're admirable in theory, but in practice they leave them paralyzed. Their retreat isn't a clever maneuver. It's the mark of a species unprepared for the brutality of true combat. Marzik grunted in agreement. They always claimed to fight smart, but in every skirmish, every ambush, their hesitation cost them dearly. They underestimated the importance of direct engagement. They trusted calculation over the raw impulse to survive. Amidst the chaos, Zyrex continued his rapid dance through the enemy lines. Dodging plasma blasts and parrying lethal strikes, he intercepted a group of attackers with lethal precision, his voice barely audible over the roar of combat. No time to think, only time to act. His cry cut through the din, underscoring the brutal lesson that while alien warriors trusted their battle-honed instincts, the humans' reliance on strategy left them vulnerable and slow to react. Nolan, rallying his remaining soldiers in the aftermath of the initial assault, addressed them with a fervor born of desperation. Listen up. Our enemies do not wait for us to be ready. They strike with the full force of instinct. We cannot afford to hesitate any longer. We must learn from this catastrophe. Our strategic approach, our careful, calculated positioning has been our downfall. We need to fuse our minds with the immediacy of our actions. His voice echoed in the shattered chamber as he continued. We fight smart, yes, but we must also fight fast and hard. Otherwise, we are nothing but observers in our own demise. Captain Reed, bruised yet unyielding, stepped forward. Sir, how do we fix this? He demanded, his tone both challenging and hopeful. We always relied on our planning, our analysis of enemy behavior. But now, it seems our opponents overwhelm us with raw, unfiltered aggression. How can we bridge that gap? Nolan's eyes flashed with the weight of hard-won insight. We adapt, Reed. We learn to trust our instincts in the moment. We must incorporate aggressive, direct engagement into our doctrine. Our battles are not won by waiting for the perfect plan. They're won by seizing the moment, by acting decisively even when fear grips us. In the tense silence that followed, Lieutenant Daniels interjected. So our failure lies in our inability to blend our theoretical strengths with the unfiltered drive of combat? Is that it? Nolan nodded slowly. Exactly. Our strategic brilliance was our downfall because it made us overly cautious. The enemy's combat philosophy, fueled by instinct and honed by endless wars, demonstrated that hesitation is fatal. We must learn to fight with both our minds and our hearts unleashed. The transport's corridors reverberated with the sounds of renewed assault as enemy forces regrouped for a second, even more ferocious attack. Thyros and Vauron exchanged determined looks as they fought side by side. Watch closely, Karassa, Thyros said as he intercepted a charging foe with a swift strike. Our enemies come in waves, each more brutal than the last. Every moment they waste waiting is a moment we seize. This is the answer to why the humans fail. They hesitate when every heartbeat demands action. Vauron's deep voice rumbled in agreement. They once believed that subtlety and cunning were enough. But against warriors forged by countless wars, such tactics are but a shadow of true combat. Their strategic approach, while noble in theory, has proven inadequate. They sit at the back because they fear the front line, not because they possess superior tactics. Even amid the chaos, small pockets of human survivors gathered to debate their future. In a dim corner, Sergeant Miles, still haunted by his earlier panic, confronted Nolan. Sir, we've lost too many already. Our enemies show no mercy because they trust their instincts. How can we expect to win if we continue to rely solely on our minds? Nolan's eyes, haunted by the losses of his comrades, softened with grim resolve. We must evolve, Miles. We must train ourselves to react in the blink of an eye. It is not enough to fight smart. We must fight with the fury of those who have nothing left to lose. In the fleeting quiet between relentless skirmishes, a young officer, Corporal Elena Reyes, dared to voice the painful truth. Are we saying that our entire doctrine is flawed? That our supposed brilliance in strategy is nothing but a cover for our inability to truly fight? Nolan's reply was measured and sorrowful. Yes, Elena, our doctrine as it stands is incomplete. We must acknowledge that our enemies have honed their combat instincts over centuries of war, while we've hidden behind calculated retreats. That is why humanity's strategic approach has failed against such experienced warriors. Later, in a secured chamber illuminated only by the flickering glow of damaged control panels, the human leaders gathered to forge a new path. Lieutenant Daniels spread out a new tactical plan on a scratched holotable. Our next step must be a hybrid strategy, he proposed. We combine our analytical strengths with the unrestrained aggression our enemies display. We need drills that force us into the front line, exercises that train our instincts to override our caution. Captain Reed added, if we can learn to react as swiftly as Zyrex, to trust our gut in the midst of chaos, perhaps we can begin to close that gap. We must sacrifice some of our calculated control for the sake of raw combat ability. Nolan's eyes burned with fierce determination as he responded, we learned from this day, the day we discovered that strategic brilliance means nothing if it isn't backed by the courage to act. Our enemies fought for survival with every instinct honed over 100 wars. It is their ferocity, their refusal to hesitate, that we must emulate. Our new doctrine will be forged in the crucible of this defeat. We will integrate direct engagement into every maneuver, ensuring that no second is wasted in indecision. As the transport lurched and the noise of battle receded momentarily into an eerie silence, Thyros rejoined his comrades with a grim smile. I have seen many battles, he confided quietly to Aldrin as they inspected the damage. But never have I witnessed a species so paralyzed by their own caution. Their approach was never about strategic depth. It was about avoiding the front line at all costs. Aldrin nodded slowly. Their combat philosophy was built on the illusion of control. They believed that by sitting in the back, they could avoid the worst of the storm. Instead, that very distance left them unprepared for its full fury. In the hours that followed, as emergency repairs were attempted and the wounded tended to, the human survivors began the arduous process of rethinking their future. In a quiet briefing in a makeshift command center, Nolan addressed his closest advisors, Daniels, Reed, and Elena. We must not allow this defeat to define us, he stated, his tone resolute despite the grief around him. Let it be the catalyst for our transformation. We now understand that our enemies fight with a ferocity born of instinct. We, too, must learn to fight with that same raw intensity. Our failure was not in our intellect, but in our unwillingness to take the necessary risks on the battlefield. Elena's eyes shone with a mixture of defiance and determination as she spoke. We now see that our tactical approach, while it gave us time to think, left us paralyzed when the enemy's assault left no time. How can we fight smart if we do not fight with urgency? How can we integrate our strategic insights with the decisive, immediate action that our foes employ? Nolan's reply was firm and unyielding. We train, we adapt, and above all, we act. Every drill from now on will simulate the chaos of real battle. Every soldier will learn to override fear and hesitation, to trust not only their training but also their instincts. Our new doctrine will blend strategy with savage immediacy. We will no longer be the observers at the back. We will be the ones charging headlong into the fray. Captain Reed, leaning forward intently, posed the question that had haunted every soldier since the ambush. So what sets us apart? Is it that our enemies fight with unadulterated aggression, while we are burdened by doubt? Nolan paused, meeting each pair of eyes before answering softly. It is our mind, but only if we free it from the shackles of overthinking. We must learn that instinct is as vital as intellect. Our enemies have mastered immediate response through relentless training and centuries of warfare. We will do the same, blending our natural analytical strengths with the impulse to fight without hesitation. In the days that followed, as training sessions extended into the night, a transformation began among the human ranks. Sergeant Miles, once paralyzed by fear, now led rapid-fire drills that forced split-second decisions. "I won't wait for orders anymore," he roared during an especially grueling exercise, his voice resonating with a promise to his comrades. Lieutenant Daniels dove headfirst into simulated combat, urging his men to trust their gut over hesitation. Even amidst rigorous drills, Zyrex observed from afar. "They're starting to understand," he remarked quietly to Karassa, who coordinated her unit's defensive maneuvers with practiced ease. Karassa's eyes glittered with a mix of respect and caution as she mused. Perhaps there is hope for them yet, if they can truly merge strategy with the primal urge to survive. On a repaired section of the transport, Thyros conversed with Sarlacc once more. "The human battle has taught us something fundamental," Thyros said, his voice low and reflective. "They fought as if trying to outsmart the enemy, but in the end, it was their hesitation that doomed them." Sarlacc nodded slowly. "Yes, and their failure lies in underestimating the necessity of raw, unfiltered combat instinct. They need to fight not just smart, but hard and fast. That is the stark lesson we must remember." As night settled over the battered vessel, the human leaders gathered one last time in a quiet, secured chamber to review the brutal lessons of the day. Nolan, his face lined with sorrow and resolve, spoke softly. "We have asked ourselves why our strategy failed. It wasn't because we lacked intelligence or foresight, it was because we lacked the readiness to engage when the moment demanded it. We sat back, believing our calculations would save us, but our inaction became our greatest enemy." Lieutenant Daniels added, "Our failure reveals a profound difference in combat philosophies. Our foes fight with relentless immediacy, trusting instincts honed by endless wars. We, in contrast, overanalyze and hesitate. That is the difference we must overcome." Captain Reed's voice rang out with determination as he concluded. "If we are to survive and thrive in this galaxy, we must evolve. We must fuse our strategic minds with the raw, unyielding drive of direct combat. We must fight as though every second is a battle for life itself." In that silent, somber moment, the truth crystallized. The answer to why humans always sat in the back was not a mark of hidden genius, but the unmistakable sign of a people unaccustomed to the savage immediacy of interstellar war. The galaxy's strongest species had learned that true combat was not measured by clever retreats or calculated delays, but by the relentless, instinctive charge toward survival. A lesson that would forever reshape the human approach to battle.